Tell us your story. You were working for the Morning Star, which I believe is a communist daily newspaper in the UK. Um, so when you say you were on the left, you really mean you was on the left.
I would. I mean, I didn't start voting till I was about 30 because I was so apolitical. I couldn't see that anybody represented me at all. And then when I did start voting, I was very, very left wing. I mean, I would have voted for communist candidates if they stood, no problem at all. And I became a political cartoonist for the Morning Star in 2015, right when Jeremy Corbyn got elected. So everybody was thinking, oh, socialism is coming back into British politics in a big way, you know. And they just liked my stuff. I mean, they had a very they were very out there in what they would accept, you know, in terms of making jokes. I think we were ripping into the Labour Party all the time. But also ripping into the establishment, the monarchy, the police, the EU, you name it, you know, they went after it, the Morning Stars. So I felt very much at home there. To me, you know, that was ideal territory for me. Yeah, and I was with them for 5 years with no problems at all.
But the problem came because they deemed one of your cartoons as not ripping into the establishment, not ripping into the government or the Labour Party, but ripping into something or a group that the far left thinks they need to support and they need to protect. So they went after you because they felt you attacked the wrong group.
Well, straight away, I want to say that I have never blamed the Morning Star for this at all. They didn't have a leg to stand on. The Trade Union Council held a special meeting. First time this has ever been done, threatened them with closure if they didn't apologise for publishing my cartoon and drop me like a hot brick. So they were forced into that position. And as I've said to you before, I had to go to the Free Speech Union because I didn't have any other resource to help me. And the Free Speech Union, first of all, threatened the Morning Star with defamation because I was being slandered all over the place as being transphobic, this and hateful that. And even though nobody knew who I was from Adam, my name was now all over the world on Twitter. And I'd never been on Twitter, still I've never been on Twitter. And the worst thing about it, Nick, as I'm sure you found yourself, is that they don't just go after you, they go after your friends, your colleagues, people who are professionally associated with you, and start attacking them if they're on Twitter. So that was starting to happen to me within a couple of weeks of this cancellation. So the Free Speech Union threatened the Morning Star with defamation. We didn't think that would fly because a single person has to do the defamation, right? So the newspaper as a whole couldn't be. But what I wanted a right of reply to be printed in the newspaper, and I wanted a personal apology from the editor. And I managed to get the personal apology. Still, nearly 3 years later, I haven't had my right to reply printed in the paper. They still haven't officially apologized or contacted me or anything. I am literally persona non grata. And it's a shame because I had a really nice relationship with them. And I don't blame the individual managers there at all.
You did better than me because at least you got an apology. The the three personal friends who sacked me from the charity I founded have never apologized, have never contacted me, never spoke to me again after they sent me one sentence email sacking me. And then obviously I beat them, and they all resigned. And they've never contacted me since and never apologized, never explained themselves. And I don't blame them per se. I blame the online mob for bullying them into being cowards, because that's what they were in the end of the day. In my view, is they were cowards, and they went, oh, this is all getting upsetting and nasty. If we give him Nick's head, it'll all go away. So they gave him my head.
Yeah, in a way, in a way, I've probably been luckier than you that it didn't come into my close circle of family and friends. It was more people who were associated with me because I'm a book illustrator as well. So it was people who were like authors who had used my work. The Twitter mobs went after them. It's a horrible experience, Nick, and it all happened at the worst possible time, beginning of the lockdowns. You know, I'm a carer for my husband. He was going through a terrible time as well. It was a terrible time for it to happen, and you just feel completely isolated, don't you? You don't know which way to turn. You know.
It's it's like shell shock. It's you have no idea what's going on. You have no experience in this. You you're scared of doing something in case it makes it worse. You're scared of doing something in case it makes it better. You're scared of getting other people involved. It's absolutely. I think if it ever happened again to me, I'd handle it so much better because I've got some experience to rely on. But the first time, I just felt like a rabbit in the headlights. I didn't know what to do for right or wrong or make it better or I didn't know anything. I was in shock.
Yeah. I mean, you and me are normal, ordinary people. You know, we weren't at any high levels. We didn't have strings of letters after our name. You know, as I've said before, I'm not saying this because I have a chip on my shoulder, but an awful lot of people who've faced cancellation have had much more resource, you know, in terms of support than you or me would have had, you know.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, my life was over. I was unemployable in the field I'd spent 2 decades working in. Who was going to employ Nick the Nazi? My life was. That's why I fought back because I didn't think I'd win the way I won. I didn't think that I'd be completely victorious. Um, I fought back trying to save part of my reputation so I could get another job. Because at that point I was thinking I'd be stacking shelves in Tesco's because no one else is going to want to employ me. And there's nothing wrong in stacking shelves at Tesco's, but that's not my field. My field is the charity sector, the social sector, and being known as Nick the Nazi wasn't going to do me any good.
Well, being cancelled bounced me into early retirement. You know, I was making plans towards early retirement anyway, and then the lockdowns came and we were all sent to work from home. And I just thought, what it was, because it all happened that because I was cancelled by the left, it meant that my own union tried to chuck me out of the union as well and tried to get rid of me as a union rep, which was my unpaid union rep. I specialised in disability and apprenticeships, by the way. And yeah, so my own union came after me, and my local union branch secretary was a lovely old guy, nearly retirement himself. He said, I will defend you, Stella. And I said, what, you mean you'll defend me against our own union? And he said, yes. And I said, I'm not having it. I said, because all my colleagues at work will be dragged into it. They're not just going to go after you. They'll go after your family, your friends, anybody you know who's on Twitter, they will go after. I said, I'm not having it. I said, I'm going to go for early retirement instead. So that might be seen as the coward's way out, but it was, you know, I had to do it because I didn't want all my union colleagues dragged into it, Nick. I just couldn't.
And I don't that isn't a coward's way out. Everyone is at a different position in their life and has different skills and has different problems going on. It's up to that individual to decide what's best for them when something like this happens. So,
and it was the total lack of support from the unions, the total lack of support, the lack of sisterhood. Where's the support for women, you know, within the unions? And only about a year before, I'd actually won a national union award for my work as a union rep. You know, it was ridiculous.
And none of that matters. Once you're in there, gun sights, none of that matters. So let's talk about this horrendous Nazi, racist, homophobic cartoon that you made in 2020. Tell me how bad this cartoon was.
Well, obviously, I hope you're going to put this on the screen so people can see it. Okay. So some people within the women's movement have been calling this the crocodile cartoon because it's obviously got a crocodile in it. It has a name. It's called Endgame. And when I sent it to the Morning Star, I sent a little piece with it explaining my motivation. Because as a political cartoonist, you look at what's in the news that week, and you're right, I'm going to do a cartoon about that. Then you forget all about it and you move on to what's hot in the news the following week. So this was in the news because the Labour Party were busy having meetings about they were going to chuck out anybody who didn't call people by the right pronouns. So that was going on at the time, and there was a lot of dispute about the Gender Recognition Act. Was it going to be expanded? made more like liberal. And so this cartoon was about that. It was about the danger of men who are going to getting this certificate to invade women's spaces. It's pretty tame when you look at it now compared to what we know has actually happened 2 years.
Can you spend a minute just describing this cartoon, because this will go on platforms that's just audio?
Okay, well, it just shows a cartoon crocodile slithering into a little pool where there's three newts in the pool with their little heads poking out. And this was actually to represent a women's only swimming space, by the way, women's only swimming session. But that was my idea behind it. So there's three little newts, and one of them is saying, "You can't come in here. This is our safe space." And the crocodile is sort of drooling at the mouth, and he's saying, "Oh, don't worry, your pretty little heads. I'm transitioning into a newt." So pretty harmless stuff. I mean, it's and the reason I've said to other people that I think there was such a reaction against it is because it's like a kid's cartoon, right? It's colourful. It's like the sort of thing you'll see on the telly, little kids' cartoons. I think that's what it was that upset people the most.
I don't think that's the reason that upset him the most.
You don't?
I
Okay.
think the reason what upset him the most is you was on the left. You was on the far left. And how are we going to protect these vulnerable groups and our ideology? It's hard enough fighting against the right for this, but when we've got internal people fighting against us, we need to go after them even harder.
And yet, as you can see, Nick, the cartoon is about women's safety and not about attacking any group at all. It's about
absolutely not
women's safety and the danger to women's safety that this because obviously the Morning Star was writing about what was going on. It was writing about the proposed changes to GRA. This wasn't in a vacuum. So they actually published the cartoon. This is what happened. They published the cartoon on the weekend edition. When the editor came back to work on the Monday, basically the SHIT hit the fan, at the Morning Star. And he's told me privately, I can talk about it now, it's 2 years later. He had to threaten to resign. Half his staff were threatening to resign. The paper was under threat of being closed down. They were really over a barrel over it, Nick, and I don't blame them to this day what they had to do. But I was very upset because I had no personal contact. You just dropped like a hot brick and there's nothing.
Yeah, and I think a bit like me, obviously you did that cartoon as professional. You was not trying to be provocative, as in more than you would normally do as a political cartoonist. You weren't having a go at anybody because you never did that before. And I think just like me, you was the wrong person at the wrong place at the wrong time. I criticised Black Lives Matter. What I said 2 years ago, you could say now nobody would blink because it's turned out to be true. What you drew 2.5 years ago, anyone could draw now. Nobody would blink because it's all turned out to be true. We were just slightly ahead of the curve, and when you put your head above the parapet by mistake, you get it shot off. I mean, you got our heads shot off by mistake.